This presentation will attempt to look at some of the values, beliefs, and behaviours of Hope Powell. Hope Powell is a women's football coach, most famous for coaching the England women's football team, and now currently coaches Brighton's women's football team. So based on the literature, in sports coaching cultures from practice to theory, I've identified some values throughout the literature. The first one is development. One of the things I like about Hope Powell is she really does encourage developing players, and it's something that I'm very passionate about as well. But she also wants to ensure that we do everything to excellence. We want to make sure that we're doing everything to become the best that we can become, which I believe is excellence. She also wants to encourage players becoming able to solve their own problems. So problem solving is definitely a key value of hers, but also from learning from past experiences and specifically through reflection. And although it's very similar to excellence, I wanted to reinforce success is a key trend throughout the literature. So a couple of beliefs that I've picked up from the literature. The first one is she talks about being aggressive and abusive doesn't work with women. She talks about experiences of watching male coaches coaching women's football players. And it's definitely something I've noticed as well through coaching, that how you behave around women in a coaching environment, you have to be respectful of the fact that this sort of behavior does not work in most women sporting environments. Negativity leads to bad working environments. This is also something I connected with because I have worked in environments which are very toxic with lots of negativity, and this isn't something that you want to be encouraging as a coach. Coaches who were players understand players. I thought this was really interesting because yes, as a coach, you will have lots of lifelong experiences, but I also think it's important to be aware of that as a coach, you don't necessarily need to have coached at the same level to understand the person in front of you. For me, I believe people are people. So as long as you understand what it was like to go through things you went through, you will see certain examples that are transferable. But it is also important to know that you will come across new experiences in new settings. So it's important to ensure that you understand those people in those environments and what they go through as well. Everyone deserves an opportunity to prove themselves, which is something that, as a female sports coach, is something she's very passionate about. So I think that's a really important thing to mention as well. And I feel everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves as well. A coach needs to understand their players. So there's a bit of a trend there when it comes back down to understanding players and being able to help players. And players can't be truly open with their head coach, but will be more open to other coaches. She talks about using the assistant coaches as the good guys or the nice guys, because she finds that as the head coach, and this is something I've experienced as well, is you aren't always the most approachable person. If a player wants to come and talk to you about a problem that they're having, they might see you as the head coach as the big boss and be almost intimidated in the way of having those more personal conversations. So having an assistant coach to fall back on is crucial, and it's something that I'm starting to play around with as well in my coaching practice. So behaviors: improve players through constructive feedback, learn from past experiences. That comes back down to that reflection that we talked about earlier. Using constructive feedback, I also think is really, really important. We need to ensure that we're giving people feedback that's going to help those players develop, which is also one of the values she talks about. Recognize the importance of experience. You only know what you know from your past experiences more often than not. So ensuring that you know these things, knowing the things that you know and using it in everyday life is really important. So using things like reflection and feedback in coaching development is the only way a coach is actually going to improve and also going to be able to get better at working with their players. Creating a player-centered environment. This is also a bit of a buzzword at the moment in coaching, where I feel that loads of coaches say it, but they don't necessarily mean it. But what Hope talks about in the chapter is she talks about, I'm not going to come out there and do loads of drills and practice this, and this. We're going to use the players in an environment where it's realistic to what they'll get in games. So they're going to do games, and then they're going to be challenged and making it relevant to those players. For me, I believe that is a player-centered environment because it's done for the players' benefit, not the coaches. Talk to players personally who do not get selected. This is something that a lot of top coaches do. So what tends to happen, from what I've heard from personal experience, is all the players who get picked for the high-level teams, the national teams, it'll make the press, and they might even find out through the press. The players that don't get picked, though, they'll get a phone call. They'll be talked to. They'll be given some things to work on. And this is something that Hope is really passionate about as well. Demonstrate positivity and creativity. So a bit of a trend throughout the book is we want to have positive environments, and we also want to encourage creativity within coaching. Really, really common trend within the book, which I thought was really interesting and something that I connected with as well in my coaching. And also just reinforcing what I discussed earlier about using assistant coaches as the nice guy. And this will also help to solve any potential issues, because the assistant coaches are more likely to hear or notice any issues that may rumble. So it's important to make sure your assistant coaches understand this and also know how to have that conversation with the coach so they can resolve any issues before any negativity comes in. So a couple of key points. Players need to be developed, understood by coaches for coaches to succeed. Really interesting point, this. So essentially coming back to that development and understanding point, which is very common within the literature. The well-being of players is very important. And I get the feeling that she's obviously, a lot of this has come from her own experiences. So she will probably have a conversation with a player who didn't get picked rather than let someone else deal with it, because she respects that herself. So she's almost demonstrating the behavior that she wanted her coaches to do for her. Knowing who you are as a coach and who your players are and how they react to certain circumstances is very important. This will affect how you coach them, which I think is a really good point, which when we talk about how to construct a coaching philosophy, this will be reinforced. Players who are self-sufficient can make their own decisions, and they are often the best players. It's not about players who just do what the coach tells them. Having that individuality and being self-sufficient is really important within sport, especially at high levels. And head coaches who take responsibility for informing players of the hard decisions should be respected, in my opinion. And this is something that I feel that she's maybe had that experience as a player, although she doesn't talk about it much in the book. I feel she's probably experienced that herself on the other side and realized that it just didn't feel right, which therefore could lead to a negative environment, which she's very passionate about not happening. And there is the reference of the literature.